Thank you, Cathaoirleach. I welcome the opportunity to speak on the Finance Bill 2012, Cathaoirleach, and I think it's interesting that we can reflect on the different atmosphere in which this debate on the Finance Bill this year is being conducted compared to where we were this time last year when we had the Finance Bill being debated in the closing days of the last Dáil, and how many things have changed since then, and how even the political atmosphere, the opportunity for discussion, discourse and debate on these issues has actually freed up in the short period of a year since this time last year, when we really were facing in what can only be described as a politically chaotic situation, not just here in this House, but generally in the country. I think it's important that we do reflect on that, because the atmosphere in which these debates takes place is extremely important, and we do look abroad. And Deputy Kelleher fairly made the point in relation to some other countries, including Greece. And when we look to Greece and look to other countries that have different pressures and far more acute pressures on them at the moment, I think it's important that we, that we reflect on that fact, that we can have a debate here in a democratic parliament, free to exchange our ideas and our views and principles in this House in relation to what should be the main economic policy, financial policy of the country into the next year. There was much in what Deputy Kelleher said that I have to say I agreed with, and I think it's welcome that he found himself able to support much of the thrust of the Finance Bill, maybe not all of it. He had some points to make about the action plan for jobs. I think that debate starts in about an hour's time, and I didn't know that colleagues would be referring to that document in any detail, so I didn't bring it down with me, because I think that's for this afternoon. But I think it would be fair to say, though, Cathaoirleach, that some of the points that Deputy Kelleher raised in respect of incentivising SMEs and all of the programme work that needs to be done there, some of which he would be familiar with himself from his own previous involvement in that department as a minister. An awful lot of that is contained in the Action Plan for Jobs, and it wouldn't really, in fairness, be sufficient simply to pick up the booklet and say there's nothing in this booklet. It just cannot be said that there's nothing in the booklet. Like, that can't be said. Deputy Kelleher might fairly want to argue that it isn't sufficient, it doesn't go far enough, there's not enough, but you can't just dismiss a document like that by simply saying that there ain't anything in it, because that just manifestly isn't true. This time last year, Cathaoirleach, a new government, or 11 months ago, a new government was formed between my party, the Labour Party, and Fine Gael. And we talk a lot about mandates, the mandates of political parties. The mandate that this government has, of course, is a pooled mandate. It's the combination of two different mandates, one for Fine Gael and one for the Labour Party. And what we agreed a number of things in the programme for government. We agreed a number of basic, very important questions, such as the configuration that there should be as between tax and public expenditure cuts. We agreed that the deficit had to be brought down within a period of time. We agreed to take an aggressive stance on the question of jobs. And I would describe it as an aggressive stance. And again, I think it's not fair. People can say that actions don't go far enough. But it simply is not true to say that the government sat back and did nothing on the question of jobs. Very quickly, within a short period of months, an initiative was brought forward. And the jobs plan that's been published this week, again, people can say that there are wider questions that need to be addressed, whether it's in relation to strategic investment, the availability of credit, which is a searing, difficult problem. I agree with Deputy Kelleher. Not an easy one to address, but one that has to be addressed. I absolutely agree with that. And certain areas of the economy that need the intervention of the state, it seems to me, the strategic intervention of the state with state money, whether it's through the outcome of the New Era partial sale of state assets, or that we locate and allocate state funds in circumstances where, as we all know, the private sector has pulled back very often from investment. It happens in every recession. The private sector tends to be found wanting. Sometimes the public sector has to step in. Now, I don't underestimate the difficulty there is for the government in achieving that kind of a policy outcome. Money is short. The availability of funding is short. Even the capital programmes have had to take cuts. But I think it's an area that we should not abandon, and I don't think it's an area that this government does intend to abandon. And I think that there is a role, absolutely there is a role for, yes, stimulus measures to be taken by the government and by the state in the period ahead. So, whereas I think and agree that the Action Plan for Jobs is in fact a very fine document and containing many proposals and plans and objectives and targets that will do a huge amount to bring forward the creation of jobs in our country, I think that we, of course, need to go further. I have no difficulty agreeing with that. Also, the question of the deficit and bringing down the deficit, I would describe it, it's a bit like a lot of policy options around, including, say, for example, the fiscal compact. I mean, it's by analogy, the fiscal compact, it seems to me, on its face, given what it contains, is worthy of support. But it doesn't, of course, as Deputy Kelleher rightly said, give us all of the answers to the huge questions that we face. It doesn't, it seems to me, go any further than what it claims to do, which is to introduce a level of fiscal discipline throughout the Eurozone. That's what it's there to do. It doesn't purport to be the solution to all of the problems. And I think Deputy Kelleher's reflections on the European Central Bank are well taken as to what the European Central Bank's role should be into the future. But, you know, it is a problematic question. Any central bank, you know, if you go right back, whether they're national central banks or this new novel idea of a European central bank, there always has to be a measure of independence that is associated with central banks. Because in order to, if you give to the central bank, whether it's the Bank of England or the central bank here or central banks in any other country, and in particular the European Central Bank, in particular remit in terms of where it's situated in the economic and monetary policy of an entity such as the Eurozone, which is still in many ways an experiment. You cannot allow, and I know Deputy Kelleher is not proposing this, but you have to guard against it being a political plaything, certainly of any individual countries, or of any, or indeed of even of the European Council or of the Eurozone itself. So I think we'll always have to have a measure of independence for that central bank, that European Central Bank. But of course, I think it's correct to say that, again, on this principle of, you know, we go so far with the fiscal pact, but we need to go further. There is a looming problem still in relation to sovereign debt in Europe. There is certainly that, not just for this country, but for the wider community. It still hasn't been fully settled. And the German emphasis on fiscal discipline, it's there, it's a reality. You know, I think that if their proposals in that regard are not inimical to our interests, I think we should support them. But I think there is a coming debate. The debate is there all the time, but that debate will have to come to a head as to what the role of the European Central Bank will be, whether it's through Eurobonds or some other way of the sovereign debt broadly being addressed across the community, and that across the Eurozone, and that clearly is something that has to be addressed in the near future. In relation to the budget itself, I look forward very much, Cathaoirleach and Minister, to having this, to going through the finance bill in committee stage in the Finance Committee, the Select Committee, where we'll have an opportunity to go through it section by section. And it does contain very many technical proposals, very many proposals which the Minister flagged in the budget. And they include amongst them tax-based or tax incentive type measures. Now, I think each of them can be justified in their own right, insofar as one has had a chance to have a look at them. However, I do agree with people who say, and I'm not sure if the Minister would disagree with this, I think he would probably agree, that we do have to be on our guard in relation to policy making that is based on tax incentives, because we've had a very bad experience in this area in the last 10 or 15 years, where most of our incentives, tax incentives, or too many of them in any event, were predicated on the area of property and incentivising people in respect of property. What we want to do now is incentivise people into productive activity, whether it's in relation to reliefs on R&D or some of the other proposals that are in there. Let's do that, but let's always guard against the possibility that they go too far, the possibility that they're allowed for too long of a period, and sometimes, in some circumstances, the risk of abuse. Certainly those issues need to be, and I know the Minister will be very alive to that, and the Government will be very alive to that, because there are limitations, it seems to me, to an economic policy that is founded to an economic policy that relies too much on tax-based incentives in relation to achieving what it needs to, achieving its objectives.
You have 1 minute left.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Can I just finally say then, in relation to the process, I feel very strongly, Cathaoirleach, and I know this is a view that's shared by the Government, that we need, and there has been reform in this House, but we need to be more involved, all of us, as members of committees and as members of the Dáil in particular, in relation to the budgetary process. And I know the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform has written to all of the committees, inviting the committees to take a more active role in relation to the budget of 2013, and is particularly on the expenditure side. And that is absolutely vital. If the day is gone when we all should just file in here on a day in December and hear what the Minister has to say, and then just file out again, or file through the lobbies in terms of the votes and then file out. We need to be active parliamentarians in these issues. We know now what the signals are for what the specifics are for next year. We know what the parameters are for next year: 2.25 and 1.25 expenditure cuts and tax measures, respectively. It's not a huge mystery for us to get down to that work of looking at where those, on the expenditure side, where those savings should be made, and I would say, respectfully say, through you, Caoirley, to the Minister, on the revenue side also. When the Finance Committee went to Berlin recently to meet with members of the Finance Committee there, it was believed by the press here in Dublin for some reason that we were going over there to conduct some sort of investigation into why there was a leak from a committee. We went for no such reason. No such reason. We weren't going over there to find out who leaked this or who leaked that. But what I found, if I found anything embarrassing about that episode, if that's the right word, it was that there appeared to be a level of discussion in the German Parliament about budgetary options for Ireland prior to there ever being such a debate in this Parliament about those options. That simply can't happen, can't be allowed to happen again. I respectfully say that to the Minister and to the Government. We must facilitate. I fully accept, I know that there's a constitutional prerogative that the Minister for Finance brings forward a budget and brings it forward to the Parliament for the approval of the Dáil. That I respect and understand. But there is a lot of room for genuine involvement and genuine input of members of this House in relation, not just on the expenditure side, which I think is clearly there and will happen through the committees, but also on the revenue side. Thank you, Caoirley.